The October afternoon light filtered through the courtyard of Maple Grove Apartments with that particular quality that made everything look like a nostalgic photograph warm. Slightly hazy, tinged with the promise of shorter days ahead, Thompson balanced 2 coffee cups in one hand while fishing for his mailbox key with the other. A daily ritual that had become as automatic as breathing in the 6 months since he'd moved into Unit 2B to be 6 months. Half a year of careful routines, designed to fill the spaces where spontaneity used to live. Coffee shop run at 3:30 p.m. when the afternoon crowd thinned out. Check mail. Nod politely to neighbors without encouraging conversation. Retreat to the safety of his apartment, where lesson plans and grading provided structure to evenings that might otherwise stretch endlessly. The breakup with Jessica had done more than end a 3-year relationship. It had made him question his ability to read situations, to trust his instincts about people. "You never really saw me, did you?" had been her parting words, delivered with a mixture of sadness and frustration that still echoed in quiet moments. Maybe she'd been right. Maybe he'd been so busy projecting what he wanted to see that he'd missed what was actually there. So now, he observed rather than engaged, noted rather than participated. Like the way Mrs. Chen from 3A always checked her watch twice before walking her ancient corgi. Or how the college students in 1C had developed an elaborate system for coordinating laundry times to avoid awkward hallway encounters, safe observations, predictable patterns. He was juggling his keys when he heard the voice behind him. "Excuse me? Can you help me fix this?" Alex turned to find one of his neighbors, the woman from the upstairs apartment directly above his. The one with the teenager who occasionally played music just a little too loud on weekend mornings. She was standing near the cluster of mailboxes, looking frazzled in a way that suggested her day had been a series of small disasters building to this moment. A professional camera bag was slung across her shoulder, and she held what had once been a tripod but now resembled abstract art, one leg bent at an impossible angle. The adjustment mechanism clearly jammed beyond simple repair. "Can you help me fix this?" she repeated, lifting the broken equipment slightly. Alex felt his defensive walls snap into place with practiced efficiency. After Jessica, he'd become hyper-aware of any interaction that might be coded differently. Then it appeared on the surface. Women who needed help with things they could probably handle themselves. Conversations that started practical and shifted personal. The careful dance of neighborly interaction that could so easily be misread as something more. "Only if you make it worth my time," he heard himself say. The words coming out harder than he'd intended. The silence that followed was the kind that seemed to expand and fill all available space. Alex watched her expression shift in real time, from the hopeful expectation of someone seeking help, to a brief flash of hurt, to something that might have been amusement if he was reading it correctly. "I meant I'd pay you," she said quietly, her voice carefully measured. "Or make dinner. I wasn't. I just need help with the mechanism." The words hit Alex like a physical blow. Of course that's what she'd meant. Here was a woman with professional photography equipment and a broken tripod, asking a neighbor for help with what was clearly a work-related problem. And he'd responded like she was trying to seduce him in the apartment complex mailbox area. Alex started, then stopped. Heat crept up his neck as the full weight of his assumption settled in. "I'm sorry, completely misunderstood." She studied his face for a moment, and Alex found himself really looking at her for the first time. Mid-30s, maybe. His dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of tired eyes that suggested she'd been problem-solving all day. Professional, but approachable. Nothing in her demeanor suggested anything beyond exactly what she'd said, someone who needed help fixing something that was broken. "Linda Martinez," she said, extending her free hand. "Unit to C, and you're the teacher, right? Maya mentioned you helped her with her English essay last month." Alex Thompson. And yes, I remember Maya. A smart kid, he gestured toward the broken tripod. "That looks like it took a pretty serious hit. A windy day, photo shoot, and apparently, gravity is undefeated." Linda's mouth quirked into what might have been a smile. "I have another job tomorrow morning, and this is my backup tripod. My main one is getting serviced." Alex felt the familiar pull of a practical problem that needed solving. the same instinct that made him good at fixing lesson plans and helping students work through complex assignments. Mind if I take a look? Linda's apartment was a study in organized creativity. The moment Alex stepped inside, he was struck by how different it felt from his own carefully neutral space. Where his walls were mostly bare except for a few generic prints he'd never bothered to replace. Hers were covered with photographs, landscapes that captured light in ways that made ordinary scenes look magical. Portraits that seemed to reveal something essential about their subjects. "Mom, is that the teacher from downstairs?" Maya appeared from what Alex assumed was her bedroom, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking like she was either coming or going somewhere important. At 17, she had her mother's dark eyes, but with an energy that seemed to fill whatever space she occupied. "Maya, you remember Mr. Thompson? He's going to try to help me fix the tripod." "Alex is fine," he said, setting his coffee cups on the kitchen counter. "And yes, I remember. How's the college prep going?" "Terrifying and exciting in equal measure," Maya replied, dropping her backpack by the door. "I'm trying to finish my personal statement for early admission. But it keeps turning into either a boring list of accomplishments or a therapy session about my existential dread." Linda laughed, a sound that seemed to come easily, naturally. "I keep telling her that's exactly the kind of honesty admissions officers want to see." "Your mom's right," Alex said, accepting the broken tripod and examining the twisted metal. "The best personal statements are usually the ones where students stop trying to sound impressive and start sounding human." The mechanism was indeed more complex than it had appeared at first glance. The central joint had been torqued so severely that it had damaged not just the visible adjustment screw but also the internal spring system that controlled the leg extension. Alex found himself genuinely focused on the problem, turning the pieces this way and that, testing different approaches. "It's not just bent," he said finally. "The whole internal mechanism is compromised. I can straighten the visible parts, but you'd need replacement springs, and probably a new adjustment collar." "So it's dead," Linda said, but without the frustration he'd expected. More like someone confirming a diagnosis they'd already suspected, not dead. Just ... in need of surgery. Alex looked up from the tripod to find both women watching him with interest. "I can order the parts online. Shouldn't cost more than $20 or $30, and I could install them. If you want?" Maya perked up. "You one of those people who's good at fixing things? Because our garbage disposal has been making this weird grinding sound for like 2 weeks. "Maya," Linda said with gentle warning. "What? I'm just saying, useful neighbors are valuable neighbors. We should cultivate this relationship." Maya grinned at Alex. "Also, Mom makes incredible enchiladas, so if you help with the tripod, you should definitely accept the dinner offer." Alex felt something loosen in his chest, the first genuine moment of connection he'd experienced with another person in months. Not the careful politeness of professional relationships or the loaded interactions he'd been avoiding. Something simpler, natural. "I'd like that," he said, surprised by how much he meant it. "Establishing the dynamic coffee?" Linda asked, already moving toward the kitchen with the efficient grace of someone accustomed to keeping multiple things in motion simultaneously. "Please." Alex settled at the small dining table, still examining the tripod components spread before him. "You know, I think I can rig a temporary fix that'll get you through tomorrow's shoot. It won't be pretty, but it'll hold." "Really?" Relief in Linda's voice was immediate and genuine. "That would be amazing. I've been doing portrait sessions to supplement my income since the divorce, and I can't afford to reschedule." Maya, who had claimed the chair across from Alex, looked up from her phone. "Mom's being modest. She's not just doing portrait sessions. She's basically become the unofficial photographer for every major event in a 10-mile radius. Graduations, anniversaries, baby photos. If someone in this town needs pictures that don't look like they were taken with a potato, they call Linda Martinez." "Maya, stop," Linda said. But Alex could see she was pleased by her daughter's pride. "It's true. Remember the Henderson wedding last month? 300 guests? And Mrs. Henderson said it was the most beautiful wedding photography she'd ever seen. Then she showed the album to like 6 other people, and now Mom's booked solid through Christmas." Alex watched the interplay between mother and daughter Maya's enthusiastic advocacy, Linda's modest deflection, and felt something he hadn't experienced in his own family growing up: easy affection. It's a genuine support without the undercurrent of judgment or expectation that had characterized most of his childhood interactions. "What kind of photography do you prefer?" he asked Linda as she set a steaming mug in front of him. "Honestly, landscapes, natural light, golden hour, the way shadows fall across mountains or water." Linda's eyes lit up as she spoke. "But portraits. Pay the bills, and I've gotten good at making people comfortable enough to look natural in front of the camera." "She has this gift," Maya added, "for getting people to forget they're being photographed. Like, you know how most people get all stiff and weird when someone points a camera at them. Mom somehow makes them feel like they're just having a conversation with a friend who happens to be documenting the moment." Alex nodded, understanding immediately. "Like being a good teacher, actually. Half the job is creating an environment where people feel safe enough to be themselves." "Exactly," Linda said, and her enthusiasm was infectious. "It's about seeing people as they really are, not as they think they should be." The words resonated more deeply than Alex had expected. When was the last time someone had seen him as he really was? Jessica's parting accusation suggested it hadn't been during their relationship. His colleagues were pleasant, but professional. His students saw him as Mr. Thompson, not Alex. But here, in this cluttered apartment with these two women who barely knew him, something felt different. "Okay," he said, picking up a small screwdriver he'd found in Linda's kitchen junk drawer. "Let me see what I can do about this temporary fix." For the next 30 minutes, Alex lost himself in the methodical work of problem-solving. Maya did homework at the kitchen counter, occasionally asking questions about her calculus assignment that Alex found himself able to answer. Linda moved around the kitchen, preparing what smelled like dinner, humming quietly under her breath. It was domestic in a way that should have felt foreign. Alex had lived alone since college, had never experienced this kind of casual family rhythm. But somehow, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "There," he said finally, testing the adjusted mechanism. "It's not going to win any beauty contests, but it should hold up for a basic portrait session. Just don't extend the legs all the way, and maybe use a sandbag for extra stability if you have one." Linda examined his work, extending and retracting the legs carefully. "This is perfect. Seriously, Alex, you saved my entire weekend. The replacement parts should arrive by Wednesday," he said, gathering the tools he'd borrowed. "I can install them then if that works for you." "It works perfectly." Linda looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Maya was right about those enchiladas, by the way. If you're free Sunday evening, consider it a proper thank you." Alex felt that dangerous warmth again, the kind that had gotten him into trouble before. But looking at Linda, at her practical ponytail and paint-stained jeans, at the way she'd solved her problem by simply asking for help, at the genuine gratitude in her eyes, he couldn't detect any hidden agenda. Just kindness, just an offer of dinner between neighbors. "I'd like that," he said again, and realized he was already looking forward to Sunday in a way he hadn't looked forward to anything in months. As he gathered his coffee cups and headed for the door, Maya called after him, "Alex, thanks for not being weird about helping. Most people our age either want something or they make it complicated. You're just ... helpful. It's nice." Walking back to his own apartment, Alex found himself smiling for the first time in weeks. Maybe Jessica had been wrong. Maybe he was capable of seeing people clearly after all. Or maybe Linda Martinez was just easier to see than most. Either way, something had shifted. The careful walls he'd built around his daily routine had developed a crack. Light was starting to seep through. The apartment felt different without Maya's animated presence, quieter, more adult. I spread my tools on their coffee table while Kat retrieved the tripod from her bedroom. "This should be straightforward," I said, examining the broken mechanism. "Famous last words of every guy who's ever attempted a repair." She laughed, settling cross-legged on the floor beside me. "My ex-husband used to say that right before creating bigger problems than the ones he started with." It was the first time she'd mentioned an ex-husband directly. I glanced up from the tripod, catching something raw in her expression before she looked away. The repair took 20 minutes. The new spring fit perfectly, and the locking mechanism clicked into place with satisfying precision. "There," I said, extending and retracting the leg several times. "Good as new. You're officially my hero." Kat stood, testing the tripod herself. "Dinner's the least I can do. I made too much pasta anyway. Occupational hazard of cooking for a teenager who eats like a linebacker." Her kitchen smelled like garlic and herbs, warm and welcoming in a way. That made my usual diet of takeout seem particularly pathetic. She moved with easy efficiency, adding extra place settings, filling wine glasses without asking if I wanted any. "How long have you been freelancing?" she asked as we sat down. "To eat." "About a year. Since graduation, really. I thought it would be temporary while I figured out what I actually wanted to do, but it's starting to feel more permanent than I expected." "The quarter-life crisis," she said with understanding. "I remember that feeling, like everyone else had. Received some manual for adulthood that got lost in your mail. I found myself actually laughing." "Exactly." Jessica Mayak, she had everything mapped out. 5-year plan, backup plans for the backup plans. I envied that certainty, but it also terrified me. "What happened?" The question was gentle, without the invasive curiosity I'd grown to expect. "We just grew in different directions, I guess." She wanted someone who shared her vision of the future, and I couldn't even figure out what I wanted for breakfast most days. I twirled pasta around my fork, surprised at how easy it was to talk about. "What about you? How long have you been divorced?" 8 months. She took a sip of wine, considering her words. "I married my college boyfriend when I was 23. Seemed like the logical next step, you know? But somewhere along the way, we stopped being partners and became co-managers of a life neither of us particularly enjoyed." The conversation flowed naturally from their shared confessions about feeling displaced, about the strange freedom and terror of starting over. We discovered an overlapping love for old movies, particularly film noir from the 40s and 50s. "Hey, there's something about the moral ambiguity," Kat said, refilling our glasses. "Everyone's flawed, but sympathetically flawed. Real people making imperfect choices, plus the dialogue," I added. "No one talks like that anymore, all subtext and barely contained longing." She smiled at that, and something shifted in the air between us, subtle but unmistakable. "I need someone with interesting bone structure," Maya announced the following Saturday, sprawled across my couch while I worked on a logo design. She'd taken to dropping by my apartment after school, usually with homework questions that turned into longer conversations. "Thanks," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "For Mom's portrait series, she's doing this whole thing about people in transition. You know, life changes, new chapters. She needs models who don't look like typical catalog people. It got my attention, and you think I look ... transitional? Definitely. Plus Mom said you have good hands for close-up shots. It's very artistic." I tried not to read too much into Kat. Discussing my hands. "When would this hypothetical modeling session happen? This afternoon, if you're free? She's got the perfect light right now, and the gallery deadline is coming up." 2 hours later, I found myself following Kat and Maya through downtown, carrying camera equipment and feeling slightly ridiculous. Kat had chosen locations that reflected the transition theme, the old train station being converted into a community center. A mural painted over a demolished building's remaining wall, the bridge where the creek disappeared into underground. Tunnels. "The key is to look thoughtful, without trying to look thoughtful," Kat instructed, adjusting her camera settings. "Just ... be present in the moment." Maya positioned herself as unofficial assistant and director. "Mom, get him by that graffiti wall. Alex, stop looking like you're posing for a driver's license photo." Through the lens, something interesting happened. Kat's professional focus transformed. She became more assertive, more precisely communicative, being photographed, really seen, and considered as a subject worth capturing. Wakened something in me I hadn't realized was dormant. Turn. Slightly left. A look just past my shoulder, like you're remembering something important. The afternoon passed quickly, moving from location to location. Maya keeping up a steady stream of commentary that somehow made the intimacy of being photographed feel safe rather than exposed. These are going to be amazing, Maya declared as we packed up the equipment. Mom, show him the one you took by the bridge. Kat hesitated, then turned the camera's display screen toward me. The image showed someone I barely recognized, more complex, more thoughtful than I saw in mirrors. The composition captured something essential about the moment, about standing between one thing and the next. You're really talented, I said, meaning it. So are you, she replied quietly. At being photographed? I mean, most people tense up, but you trusted the process. Maya looked between us with satisfaction, as if she'd orchestrated something important. 2 weeks later, the storm hit without warning. One moment I was reviewing client feedback on a restaurant logo. The next, the building was plunged into complete darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in briefly, then failed, leaving only the sound of rain against windows and the distant rumble of thunder. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight and checked my supplies candles. Battery-powered radio. Enough. Food for a siege. Living alone had made me oddly prepared for minor disasters. A knock at my door interrupted my inventory. Kat and Maya stood in the hallway, Maya clutching a pillow and looking younger than usual in the dim light. Our power's out too, Kat said. Maya wondered if you might have better luck with yours. Same situation here, but I've got candles and entertainment. I gestured them inside. Radio dramas and emergency snacks, practically a party. We arranged candles around the living room, creating pools of warm light that transformed my sparse apartment into something more intimate. Maya claimed the couch, wrapping herself in the throw blanket I'd gotten from my grandmother. The radio crackled to life, broadcasting an old mystery serial that drew us all into its atmospheric storytelling. Somewhere during the second episode, Maya's breathing deepened into sleep. Kat and I found ourselves whispering, unwilling to break the spell of candlelight, an old-fashioned drama. She feels safe here, Kat murmured, watching her daughter sleep. Oh, that's not always easy to find. Safe from what? Kat was quiet for a long moment.
The divorce was harder on her than she lets on. Her father and I.
We weren't good at hiding our problems toward the end. She's been cautious about trusting new people in our lives. I studied Maya's peaceful expression. She doesn't seem cautious with me. No, she talks about you constantly, Alex this, Alex that. It's like she's decided you're family. It's the weight of that trust settled between us. Kat shifted slightly, moving closer without seeming to realize it. In the candlelight, with the rain creating a private world outside, the careful boundaries we'd maintained seemed suddenly fragile. I married young, Kat said softly, apropos of nothing. Twink 3 felt so adult at the time, but I realize now I barely knew myself. I went straight from my parents' house to college to marriage. I never had those years of figuring out who I was alone. And now I'm 31 with a teenager, starting over completely. It's terrifying and exhilarating and lonely all at once. I understood that feeling exactly. My parents had the messiest divorce in suburban history. 2 years of lawyers and screaming matches and using me as a messenger service. I swore I'd never put myself in a position to hurt someone that badly. Is that why you and Jessica ... Partly. When things got serious, really serious, I panicked. Better to end it cleanly than risk destroying each other later. We talked until the radio programming shifted to late-night music, sharing stories about family, dreams deferred, the strange vulnerability of starting over in your 20s and 30s. When the power finally returned, the sudden flood of electric light felt harsh, artificial. We should go, Kat said, gently waking Maya. But as they gathered their things, something fundamental had changed. We'd crossed into deeper territory. Shared the kind of honest conversation that creates intimacy whether you intend it or not. Standing in my doorway, Maya already heading toward their apartment, Kat turned back. Thank you. For the candles, the company, ... everything. Anytime. She smiled, and for a moment, in the space between my door and hers, anything seemed possible. The Riverside Gallery buzzed with the kind of controlled energy that accompanied opening nights. Conversations pitched at the perfect volume to suggest sophistication, wine glasses held at precise angles, people moving through the space with practiced appreciation. Alex stood near the entrance, adjusting his tie for the third time, and wondering if he'd overdressed for what Linda had described as just a small local showing. Then he saw the photographs. Linda's work commanded the main wall of the gallery, a series titled Quiet Moments that transformed ordinary scenes into something profound. There was Maya at the kitchen table, caught in a shaft of afternoon light as she worked on homework. Her expression, one of fierce concentration. An elderly man feeding pigeons in the park, his weathered hands gentle despite their obvious strength. Children playing in a fountain, their joy frozen in crystalline droplets of water and laughter, and there, scattered throughout the collection, were several photographs of him. Alex found himself staring at an image he didn't remember being taken himself. On Linda's back porch, coffee cup in hand, looking off into the distance with an expression of contentment he hadn't realized he wore. In Linda's lens, he looked like someone at peace, someone who belonged exactly where he was. She captured something beautiful there. Alex turned to find Maya beside him, radiant in a dress he'd never seen before, her hair styled for the occasion. She looked older tonight, more sophisticated, but her pride in her mother was unmistakably genuine. "Your mom has an incredible eye," Alex said, still studying the photograph. "She does. But I think she had good subject matter to work with." Maya grinned and linked her arm through his. "Come on, let me introduce you to people. Everyone's been asking about Mom's mysterious male model." For the next hour, Maya guided him through the reception with the confidence of someone completely in her element. "This is Alex," she would say to each new group of admirers. "Mom's friend who helped with her project, and he's a teacher, so he's full of interesting stories." Alex found himself drawn into conversations about art, about teaching, about the way Linda managed to capture unguarded moments that revealed something essential about her subjects. He watched Linda across the room, gracefully accepting compliments and discussing her technique with other photographers, and felt something shift in his understanding of who she was. He'd always known she was talented, but seeing her work displayed professionally, watching the way other artists spoke about her composition and use of light, made him realize he'd been thinking of her photography as a side business rather than a serious artistic pursuit. She wasn't just taking pictures to pay bills, she was creating art that moved people, that made them see the world differently. "The portraits are extraordinary," he overheard a gallery regular saying to her companion, "especially the series with the same male subject. There's such intimacy there, such trust between photographer and model. You can tell she really sees him." Alex felt heat creep up his neck, part pride, part something more possessive that he didn't want to examine too closely. The idea that strangers could see something in those photographs, could detect the connection he'd been trying so hard to keep appropriate, was both thrilling and terrifying. Linda caught his eye from across the room at that moment, and her smile was soft, knowing she'd heard the comment too. As the evening wound down and the crowd thinned, Alex found himself helping Linda and Maya pack up the remaining wine and clean reception platters. The gallery owner, a woman named Sandra, with silver hair and impeccable taste, had already discussed future opportunities with Linda Group show in the spring. Possibly something larger if tonight's response was any indication. "Thank you," Linda said quietly as they loaded the last of the equipment into her car. "For coming tonight, for being here." "For modeling?" Alex asked, though he suspected that wasn't what she meant. Linda paused, car keys in her hand, and looked at him directly. "For seeing me as an artist first. Most people see divorced mom before anything else. You've always taken my work seriously, even when I wasn't sure I should." The words settled between them with a weight that felt significant, acknowledging something that had been building for months. Back at Linda's apartment, Maya disappeared to her room with promises to start taking down her reception hair and makeup, a process that she informed them could take anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, depending on how much she wanted to preserve the styling for future reference. Alex and Linda found themselves alone in the kitchen, unpacking leftover reception food and writing the particular. "Hi, that comes after a successful public validation of private work. Sandra seemed really interested in your next project," Alex said, arranging cheese and crackers on a plate neither of them was likely to eat. She was. Actually, she mentioned. An opportunity that I'm not sure how to feel about. Linda leaned against the counter, still in her gallery dress but with her shoes kicked off, looking like someone coming down from an adrenaline rush. There's a photographer in Portland who saw my work online. He's putting together a group exhibition next spring, and Sandra thinks I should submit. That's incredible, Linda. Portland would be a huge step. It would mean traveling more, maybe relocating eventually if things went well. Linda studied his face as she spoke. Maya's almost 18. She'll be starting college next year anyway. Alex felt something cold settle in his stomach knot. Jealousy. Exactly, but a sense of loss he hadn't expected. The thought of Linda leaving, of this carefully constructed life they'd built together, dissolving, created a void he could almost feel. Would you miss this? Linda asked, her voice careful. She gestured vaguely, but Alex understood she meant more than just the apartment, the routine, the shared dinners. I'd miss you, Alex said honestly. Both of you. But Maya especially would miss you if you left. Linda sat down across from him at the kitchen table. The same table where they'd shared so many meals, so many conversations that had slowly, inevitably become more intimate than either of them had intended. That's not what I meant, she said. Quietly, the moment stretched between them, filled with all the things they'd been carefully not saying for months. Alex could hear Maya moving around upstairs, water running in the bathroom, the ordinary sounds of evening routine that had become the soundtrack to his contentment. I know what you meant, he said finally. Linda nodded, her hands folded on the table between them. I didn't plan this, Alex. When you moved in, you started helping with Maya's homework and fixing things around the apartment. I thought you were just a nice neighbor, a friend. And now I wake up looking forward to seeing you. I find excuses to ask for your help with things I could probably handle myself. I take pictures of you because I like the way you look when you think no one's watching. Linda's voice was steady, but Alex could see the vulnerability in her eyes. I've developed feelings I didn't expect and don't know what to do with. Alex felt his carefully maintained boundaries crumble completely. I've been trying to ignore how I feel about you out of respect for Maya, for you, for the situation. How do you feel about me? The question hung in the air between them, simple and impossible, like I've been waiting my whole life for someone to see me the way you do, Alex said. I want to be part of your life, part of Maya's life, in whatever way you'll have me. Like I'm falling in love with both of you, but especially you. And I don't know if that's selfish or honest or completely inappropriate. Linda reached across the table and touched his hand the first. Intentional contact they'd shared beyond accidental brushes and casual touches. It's all of those things, she said. We care too much about Maya's well-being to act impulsively. So what do we do? I don't know, Linda admitted. But I'm glad we're finally being honest about it. Alex woke the next morning in his own apartment with a clarity that surprised him. Confession, rather than creating more confusion, had somehow simplified things. He wasn't infatuated or simply lonely or projecting his need for connection onto the first available situation. He genuinely cared for Linda for her ambition, her kindness, her fierce protection of Maya, her ability to see beauty in ordinary moments, and he cared for Maya for her bright intelligence, her easy affection, her complete trust in the adults around her to make good decisions on her behalf. The complexity of the situation hadn't disappeared overnight, but his certainty about his own feelings had crystallized into something he could finally name and claim. He wanted to be part of their lives, not as Maya's tutor or Linda's helpful neighbor, but as someone who loved them both, who was committed to their happiness even when that meant setting aside his own desires. The decision, when it came, felt less like a choice and more like a recognition of what had always been true. Some things were worth the risk of honesty, worth the careful navigation of complicated feelings, worth the possibility of creating something beautiful especially when it didn't fit conventional patterns. Alex made coffee, showered, dressed for the day ahead. Then he walked downstairs and knocked on Linda's door, ready to begin the most important conversation of his life. Whatever came next, they would face it together, with their eyes wide open and their priorities clear. Maya first, always. But maybe. With enough care and patience and honest communication, there was room for something else, too. Something worth fighting for. In Linda's living room on a Tuesday evening, Alex sat cross-legged on the floor, helping Maya construct a model of the globe. Theater for her Shakespeare unit, while Linda edited photos at the kitchen table. The domestic tableau had become as natural as breathing Mayos materials spread across the coffee table. Linda's quiet concentration punctuated by occasional soft curses when the editing software didn't cooperate. Alex's patient explanations of Elizabethan architecture, blending with the household's evening routine. The flag system was actually a form of advertising, Alex explained, carefully gluing a tiny banner to the model's roof. Different colors told the audience what kind of play they were about to see, so like movie trailers, but with flags. Maya said, squinting as she painted miniature wooden beams. That's actually pretty smart. From the kitchen came the soft sound of Linda's laughter. I love listening to you to work together. It's like having a very nerdy radio show playing in the background. These moments had become the foundation of their new normal. Wednesday dinners that stretched late into the evening, conversations flowing from Maya's college applications to Alex's lesson planning to Linda's latest photography projects. Saturday morning coffee while Maya slept in, the kitchen filled with comfortable silence and shared newspaper sections.
Alex's phone
Buzzed throughout each day with texts from Linda, photos of interesting light, questions about Maya's homework, small observations that didn't require responses but created a continuous thread of connection. The progression felt organic, inevitable, like they were all growing into roles they'd been meant to fill. Alex found himself keeping mental notes about household needs during his grocery runs. Linda automatically included him in family decisions about Maya's activities and weekend plans. Maya began referring to we when talking about family activities, the pronoun naturally expanding. To include their unofficial third member, the boundaries they'd established were carefully maintained, but no longer felt restrictive. Alex helped with household projects and homework supervision, but always left at a reasonable hour. Linda included him in family decisions while maintaining her role as Maya's primary parent. They texted constantly, but kept physical affection. Limited to brief touches when Maya wasn't looking, a hand on a shoulder. Fingers brushing during shared tasks, the occasional meaningful glance across a crowded room. You know, Maya said conversationally, not looking up from the chemistry homework spread across the kitchen table, I really like Alex. Linda paused in her coffee preparation, cup halfway to her lips. Maya's tone was deliberately casual. The kind of studied nonchalance that usually preceded important conversations. Do you? Linda asked carefully. Yeah, he's good for you. Maya finally looked up, her expression more mature than 17 had any right to be. You laugh more when he's around. Like really laugh, not just the polite kind you do with other people. Linda sat down across from her daughter, recognizing that this was one of those moments that would shape how they navigated the next phase of their lives. Maya, Mom, I'm not blind or stupid. Maya's voice was gentle but firm. I've been watching you to dance around each other for months. The way you both light up when the other person walks into the room, how you text constantly but try to be subtle about it. The fact that Alex has basically become part of our family without anyone officially acknowledging it. Linda felt her carefully maintained composure slip slightly. Are you uncomfortable with that? Are you kidding? I've been hoping you'd figure it out. Maya grinned. I was starting to worry I'd have to lock you both in a closet until you had an honest conversation. You knew, Mom? You bought new clothes? For the first time in like 3 years, you bought clothes that weren't from Target or the clearance rack. And Alex stopped looking like he was afraid to touch anything in our apartment. Of course I knew. Linda stared at her daughter, amazed once again by Maya's perceptiveness. And you're okay with it? I'm more than okay with it. Alex makes you happy in a way I haven't seen since Dad died. He's kind to both of us without being weird about it. He respects our space, but also makes it better just by being in it. Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. I hope he sticks around, like permanently sticks around. The weight of Maya's approval was both a relief and a new kind of pressure. Linda had been so focused on protecting her daughter from potential disruption that she hadn't considered how Maya might actually want their family to grow. No pressure or anything, Maya added with a laugh that sounded exactly like Linda's. It started with hand-holding during a movie night in December. Maya curled between them on the couch, fast asleep despite her insistence that she was too old for family movie nights. Alex's fingers found Linda's in the darkness, tentative at first, then certain when she didn't pull away. They sat like that for the rest of the film, Linda's thumb tracing gentle circles on Alex's palm. Both of them hyper-aware of the simple connection, while maintaining perfect stillness, so as not to wake. Maya then came the longer conversations after. Maya went to bed, the kitchen table becoming their private sanctuary, where they could talk without the careful moderation required by Maya's presence. These talks ranged from practical Maya's college applications, Linda's growing photography business, Alex's consideration of applying for department head next year, to profound their respective histories with love, their fears about getting this wrong, their hopes for what they were building together. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Linda admitted one night in January, cradling a mug of tea between her palms. "For something to go wrong, or for you to realize this is too complicated. I keep waiting for you to decide I'm too young, or too inexperienced with family dynamics, or just too much work," Alex replied. "But maybe we're both overthinking this. Maybe we're thinking about it exactly the right amount." Alex began staying later when household emergencies arose, till one night when a burst pipe required his presence until nearly dawn. Linda made coffee at 5 a.m., and they sat in her kitchen watching the sunrise, both of them exhausted and oddly giddy from the intimacy of shared crisis management. Alex's hair was disheveled, Linda's makeup long gone, and somehow they'd never been more attracted to each other. "You don't have to go upstairs just because Maya's about to wake up," Linda said, refilling his coffee cup. "I know," Alex replied, "but I want to do this right." "This is right," Linda said softly. "Whatever this is, we're doing it right." The first real kiss came 6 weeks later. On a February evening when Maya was at a friend's house and Alex had stayed for dinner, they were cleaning dishes together, moving around each other with practiced efficiency, when Linda turned to say something and found herself close enough to Alex to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Linda," he said, her name a question. "Yes," she answered, though he hadn't asked anything specific. The kiss was careful, deliberate. Weeks of tension and affection distilled into a moment that felt both inevitable and miraculous. When they broke apart, Linda rested her forehead against Alex's and laughed softly. "That was worth waiting for," she said. "Everything about this has been worth waiting for," Alex replied, his hands gentle on her face, 6 months after the tripod incident that had started everything. Alex stood in his kitchen preparing dinner for Linda and Maya, marveling at how his apartment had transformed without him quite noticing. Maya's latest art project, mixed media piece exploring the theme of family, was magneted to his refrigerator next to grocery lists. Written in Linda's handwriting and a photo strip from their recent visit to the mall's old-fashioned photo booth. Linda's photography books had gradually migrated to his shelves, interspersed with his literature texts in a way that suggested permanence rather than temporary borrowing. The changes weren't dramatic: a coffee mug that lived permanently in his cupboard because Linda preferred it to her own, a spare phone charger coiled near his bed because she sometimes stayed late enough to need it, Maya's calculus textbook bookmarked with one of his sticky notes from when he'd helped her with a particularly challenging problem set. Small infiltrations that spoke to how thoroughly his life had been reorganized around theirs. The marinara sauce simmered on the stove while Alex checked the bread in the oven. Following Linda's patient instructions from their phone call earlier, cooking for other people had become one of his favorite challenges, each meal a small offering of care. He'd graduated from his notorious disaster pasta to actual recipes, guided by Linda's gentle coaching and Maya's surprisingly sophisticated palate. "Something smells incredible," Linda's voice came from the doorway, earlier than expected and alone. "Maya?" Alex asked, turning from the stove to find Linda leaning against the doorframe with the relaxed posture of someone who belonged exactly where she was. "Sleepover at Sarah's house. Apparently they're working on some elaborate project involving glitter and what?" Sarah's mom described as an alarming amount of caffeine. Linda approached him, sliding her arms around his waist from behind, which means we have the entire evening to ourselves, like actual adults. Alex leaned back against her, still not quite believing his luck. The simple intimacy of her presence in his kitchen, the casual assumption that she belonged there, the way her chin fit perfectly against his shoulder, it all felt like a gift he was still learning to accept. I was thinking, Linda continued, her voice muffled against his shirt. Maybe we could talk about some things we've been putting off, like what this actually is, what we want it to become. Alex turned in her arms, recognizing the importance of the moment. They'd been so careful, so focused on Maya's needs and the delicate balance of their situation, that they'd never really discussed their own long-term hopes. What do you want it to become? He asked. Linda considered this seriously, her hands resting on his chest. I want to stop feeling like we're sneaking around, even though we're not really sneaking. I want Maya to see that adults can build something healthy and lasting together. I want to wake up next to you sometimes without it being the result of a household emergency. She paused, then smiled. I want to introduce you as my partner, not just Maya's tutor who helps around the house. Alex felt something settle permanently in his chest, a sense of rightness that had nothing to do with convenience or circumstance, and everything to do with genuine love. Do you regret that first day? Linda asked suddenly, your response to my question about fixing the tripod? Alex turned off the burner and gave her his full attention, considering the question seriously. I regret misunderstanding you. I regret letting my own baggage make me defensive when you were just asking for help, but not the outcome. Even with all the complexity, the careful timing, the constant consideration of Maya's feelings, the way we've had to build this around existing obligations instead of just diving in headfirst, especially because of it, Alex said, without hesitation. Easy things aren't usually worth much. What we have, it's real because we've worked for it. Because we've chosen it every day, not just in one dramatic moment. Because we've proven to ourselves and to Maya that we can put her well-being first, even when it costs us something we want. Linda smiled, the expression that had first caught his attention now familiar and precious. I love that about you. Your willingness to do things the hard way if it means doing them right. I love that about us, Alex corrected. Do things the hard way. We consider consequences. We put Maya first, even when it costs us something we want. And somehow that's made what we have stronger, not weaker. Maya asked me yesterday if you were going to move in here, or if we were going to move in with you, Linda said, her tone carefully casual. Alex felt his heart skip. What did you tell her? That it was something we'd need to discuss together. All three of us. Linda's eyes searched his face. What would you tell her? Alex thought about his apartment upstairs, how it had gradually become a second home to both Linda and Maya, how their presence had transformed it from a temporary refuge into something that actually felt like belonging. Then he thought about Linda's apartment, with its photographs on every wall and its kitchen table that had become the site of so many important conversations, and how it had become the center of his emotional universe. I'd tell her that the most important thing is that we're a family, regardless of which apartment we call home, he said finally. But if I'm being honest, I think I'd like to wake up in the same place as both of you more often than not. The timer for the bread chimed, and Linda reluctantly stepped back to let him check the oven. How long until Maya comes home tomorrow? She asked, her tone casual, but her eyes suggesting she had plans for their time alone. Not until afternoon, Alex replied, matching her tone. We have all morning, Linda said, moving to set the table with the ease of someone who'd performed this task in this kitchen dozens of times. I have some ideas about how to spend it. Maybe we can start figuring out the logistics of this next phase. Next phase? Moving in together. Officially, Maya's already started referring to our apartment when she talks to her friends. I realize she means whichever one we happen to be in at the time. Linda paused in her table setting. I think she's ready for us to be ready. Alex felt a profound sense of pieces falling into place, of a puzzle he'd been working on for months finally revealing its complete picture. This wasn't just about romance. or companionship, or even love. It was about building something sustainable and meaningful, about creating a family that worked for all three of them. "I think I'm ready too," he said. He found himself in that same courtyard now, but as participant, rather than observer. Maya knelt beside him on the concrete, Linda's professional camera in her hands, frowning with concentration as she attempted to capture the way shadows fell across the building's brick facade. "The light's too harsh," she complained, checking. "The camera's display, everything looks washed out." "Try adjusting the aperture," Alex suggested, pointing to the appropriate dial. "And maybe move so the building's shadow is behind you instead of in front." Above them, on the balcony of apartment to see, Linda watched with amusement as her daughter commandeered her equipment and her boyfriend served as technical advisor. The scene was so domestic, so perfectly ordinary, that it took her breath away. Alex glanced up, caught her watching, and smiled the same smile that had emerged gradually over months of careful attention. Shared responsibility and slowly deepening trust. But now it carried the weight of acknowledged love, of a future they were building together with deliberate patience. Some attractions, Alex thought as Maya cheered over a particularly successful shot, aren't immediate or simple. Time to develop, like photographs in a darkroom, revealing their true form only under careful conditions. He'd learned that real intimacy required patience and respect. That family could form in unexpected configurations, that some of the best relationships were built slowly, with constant attention to the needs of everyone involved rather than just the desires of two people. Maya lowered the camera and grinned at him. "I think I'm getting the hang of this." "What?" "To see?" Alex leaned over to examine the camera's display, struck by how Maya had inherited her mother's eye for finding beauty in ordinary moments. The photograph showed the courtyard as he'd never seen it, warm, welcoming, alive with possibility. "It's perfect," he said, and meant it about more than just the image. Linda appeared in the courtyard, having abandoned her post on the balcony to join them. "Dinner in 20 minutes, she announced. "Maya, you need to return my camera in working condition." "It's fine, Mom. Alex taught me about all the important buttons." "That's what I'm worried about," Linda said, but her tone was fond as they gathered Linda's equipment and headed inside. Alex felt the familiar satisfaction of belonging exactly where he was. This wasn't the life he'd planned, or the love story he'd imagined 6 months ago. It was better, more complex, more rewarding, more real than anything he could have designed for himself. They were writing their own definition of family, one careful day at a time. And Alex had never been happier to let someone else hold the camera while he learned to live fully in the frame.